Welcome to Wednesday webinars. I'm Deb Wragge, your hostess. My contact information is right here on this slide. And the topic for today is revision. Now, a copy of the PowerPoint and the sample lesson to go along with this PowerPoint can be found on the NNNC Writing Wiki Spaces page. Those links are posted at the end of the webinar. So let's begin. First of all, I want to acknowledge the assistance that I received from Jeff Anderson and Deborah Dean's book, Revision Decisions. Much of the information that I'm sharing today I found in their text, and after viewing this webinar, and if you would like to purchase this text, all the information that you need to know can be found on this slide, which is slide number 2. Just what happens to a student in that space between ideas and words. Have you ever noticed that when a student talks their ideas for writing, that they exhibit a spark, a personality, and a special pizzazz? They express interesting ideas both fearlessly and creatively. Yet when the writing they submit turns up on your desk or on your desktop of your computer, oh gosh, it just lacks the luster and the enthusiasm and the originality that they started out with at beginning, as they were beginning to write their topic. So, what happens between the talk and the written draft? Where did that spark and passion go? What happened in translation from that idea that they had to the paper. Today in this webinar, I will share part of the research on revision. And there are 4 principles of revision that I'm going to be sharing with you. And then there's a lesson in revision that you can actually download and then implement with your students. It is a sample from the work of John Anderson and Deborah Dean. Now, we know that revision is often confusing and a difficult process for students, but it's also the most important part of the writing process. Never is there a time that a piece that we write is truly at its finest quality, finest clearness, finest ability to communicate with others than after it's been revised, and perhaps even revised multiple times. So the question always is, what can teachers do to smooth the pace between the ideas that students have and the drafting that they do? I'm going to share a few ideas with you today about what teachers can do to smooth the pace. Now, there are some great writing truths, and great writing doesn't always happen on your first attempt, nor should we expect it to if we truly believe in the writing process. You know, our students need options for how to say what they want to say. They need options for revising at the sentence level, and that means lots of options at the sentence level. They need to feel free to scratch their ideas down on paper and stuff them away and then draw them out as they need them or as they can include them within their writing. They need to trust that within the writing process, they will revise and edit sentences. You know, revising is clarifying, it's putting in and taking out, but editing is anything that an editor would do when it comes to grammar. And whereas revising is just as I said, clarifying, making it more palatable to the reader. Eventually creating the writing they see in their minds is the goal. What they see in their minds is actually what they have down on the page in front of them. And yes, by this very act of revising, you know, those students grow to be writers. They creating stronger and stronger first drafts as they work through this process. But to become fluent writers, brimming with all possible decisions, students need to take on writing behaviors, especially the flexibility, and the creativity of revision. You know, when you work with revision, quite often you have to recast and you have to reorder, you have to delete and you have to expand, you have to decide, and you always are evaluating. As teachers, we orchestrate situations that can cause talk and problem solving. Now, we can also create an environment where tussling and playing with words is routine rather than rare. And through interaction and conversation, we are able to create flexible writers who can meet the needs of their readers. There are some writing truths that we need to talk about today, too. Um, I know we talk about 21st century learners and such, but we also must consider 21st century writers and what they need. Above all, they need to be flexible in their thinking and resilient in considering options. They have to be flexibility in thinking means that they have to be broader in their thinking, and resilient means that maybe they might have to try this more than one time. And when they look at the options as to where a story or a piece can go. Revision is where writers get their wings, their flexibility, their effectiveness. Now, what I mean by they get their wings is that this is where they really start to have the piece becomes alive. It comes off of the paper. That's where they get the abilities in order to arrange and rearrange sentences through the combining of sentences or through the use of punctuation or through other effective strategies that they increase their effectiveness of painting a picture with words on paper. Revisions decisions also can slow writers down. When you're looking at a piece for revision, you need to consider the meaning of the piece and the options or the writer's options for shaping and connecting those ideas which flow through the piece. In other words, are the connecting ideas connected in such a way that it draws the reader further and further down the page so that they have that desire in order to be able to continue reading the piece that has been written. Now, this is the current research on writing. And as you notice, there's Graham and Perrin wrote Writing Next. And the purpose of that was to talk about what works best in writing. And if you'll notice here, they point us towards sentence combining. And they say that there are 11 research proven methods to effectively develop writers in grades 4 through 12. Now, the text that I'm using today speaks specifically to writers in grades 4 through 10. So if there are 11 research proven methods, this text and the methods that it shows and shares with us also share some of those research proven methods. Now, the recommendations above matches what we know about brain and fluency research about how students learn. And that is very simply, we know that when they become engaged in the information and the processes that they're using, and when we practice with them, we actually want them with what we actually want them to be able to do. Now, these are the four principles of making revisions decisions. Principle one is creating a context for revising sentences. Principle two is invite collaboration that becomes the conversation in the writer's heads. And principle three is allow choice, risk taking, and error. Principle four asks us to make meaning by reflecting and evaluating. We're going to go deeper into each one of these principles and have a little more definition about them and some examples of each and how they manifest themselves. As you can see on this slide, the revision process gives us another chance to re-see what we've written, reformulate what we've written, and perhaps even redesign what we've written by moving one piece to another piece, moving one to make it easier for us to be able to read and digest and get that visual picture in our mind as we read that writer's piece. Now, let's go right into principle 1, create a context for revising sentences. Now, the research on separating grammar and revision instruction from writing isn't effective. You've got to put those together. Just look at how many times that study has been replicated, and that same research finding has been found to be true. Students need to be writing all the time, constantly generating ideas for drafting, revising, and or polishing their writing piece. They should experience writing at all of the stages of the writing process, and even as writers at all levels of development do in their writing, have some pieces of writing that never go anywhere, that stay drafts forever, beginnings without endings, and so on and so forth. That's okay. Not every piece of writing has to be a completely finished piece right up to publication. Now, we know that when writers compose and revise writing regularly and often, they come to see the writing process as just an inherent part of their work. It's just what they do. Not simply, it's what they do in order to increase their work. It's not simply not something that they do in English class just to get by or to fake that they're making strengthening their particular piece of writing. But the writers do need to revise their writing regularly and often. Until students have practiced rethinking and revising their writing, they can't reach that point skilled writers achieve. They can't achieve where the thought is revised and restructured, and structures are constantly called upon, constantly and unconsciously called upon as they write time and time again. In other words, it all has to become so automatic when they write. They need to practice that, rethink and revise. So as teachers, these questions come to mind about teaching writing to our students. The first question is, how do writers get comfortable with the tools of words and sentences? The next question would be, how do we get our students started in doing what writers do to revise on a more automatic and regular basis? And how do we help them see the options and get the practice that fluency requires? Well, there's a very simple answer for that. The answer is by playing with ideas and sentences. We have to allow our students to do this. When playing with sentences and trying new things, Anderson and Dean say, it makes our rhetorical muscles grow, meaning we can say stuff more clearly and our writing gets better and better. Isn't that nice to know, teachers? Isn't that nice to know that when we play with sentences and try new things, there's nothing that can happen but make our writing get better and better? How exciting. James Britton is known for saying that reading and writing float on a sea of talk. Now, we've just moved into principle 2 Invite collaboration that becomes the conversation in the writers' heads. Now, his research goes on to say that talk and active processing continue through continued only to help enhance our work. And we know that other research, such as the research that I just popped up on the screen from Marzano, Pickering and Pollock, Garam and Perrin and Langer and et al., they always talk about talk, talk it through, and engagement, active processing. It's very, very important. And principle two lends itself to that. Anderson and Dean go on to tell us that revision of sentences most certainly sink without talk. They tell us that it is in the essential conversation, it is in the starts and the restarts, that it's in the tentativeness of speech, that it's in the richness of syntax background already imprinted in the students' minds, and in risk-free responsibility that talk allows. It's through talk we find the true benefits of revision decisions. This is where the transformation happens. It's in the talking out of our sentences and our innate desire for things to make sense that students find their style, their voice, and their flexibility. This quote from page 12 in Anderson and Dean's book said, "It is in the talking out of sentences and our innate desire for things to make sense that students find their style, their voice, and their flexibility." Just like I shared with you in the slide before, only here it is directly quoted from the book. So Johnson and Dean also tell us that there are 3 E's of effective sentences. First, they talk about the economy. Being efficient with language can be a good reason for choosing a particular sentence over another one. They go on to say and share with us that, like being careful with money, if you're efficient with language, can also be a good reason for choosing one sentence over another one. And ultimately, writers delete for economy. In other words, they want to get the most bang for their buck. They want to be able to paint that picture in your mind of what that sentence or those groups of sentences, paragraphs, and so on, what visualizations they make into your mind. Then they talk about emphasis. They say that writers create a variety of structures that result, in a variety of effects through rearranging words in certain places can get more attention than words do in other places. So choosing certain words to go in those what we're going to call attention getting spaces, or can even go the opposite direction with attention losing spots, can make a difference as to how an idea that the writer wants to get across stands out. Last but not least of the 3 E's of effective sentences is effect. Here it says, reminds us that some syntactical choices help to create, a tone fitting somewhere on a range from very simplistic to sophistication. Let me give you an example of what that would syntactical construction might be, or it might seem so common that it creates a pedestrian tone, as in this example from Schuster in 2005. "My dog and I hunt, fish, walk, eat, and sleep together." Of course, we can have a more sophisticated construction of that sentence, and it might read like this: "My dog and I do everything together: hunt, fish, walk, eat, and sleep together." See, so you want to make sure that you create a tone so that it doesn't get sing-songy but it makes the fluency of the sentence be that much more interesting, or the fluency of the picture that it draws within your mind that much more clear and evident. Okay, let's move right on to principle 3. It's allow choice, risk taking, and error. Now, when students have open choice in how to revise their sentences, you and I both know they never know what they're gonna come up with, and that is what's exciting. They need to have some choices. They need to do some risk taking. Um, it's essential to the play and the learning that they're going to be doing in order to become the excellent writer that we want them to be. Um, just as this line says, they're developing. They need the chance in order to be able to do that. When students have those open choices to revise sentences, you never know what they're going to do. Now, um, that's what's exciting about this. And if they make an error, or find that there's an error in a piece of, let it be a learning situation. Let risk taking be a learning situation as well as choice. However, we need to be flexible in our instruction, and that makes some teachers very nervous about embracing the uncertainty. And these might be some of the questions that you have right now when I'm talking about being flexible. Many of you believe that if you don't edit or revise your student's paper and write your comments or your thoughts in the side of the students' papers, that paper will never be of value or never hold what it needs to have. Now, don't be so nervous about this. Don't be so concerned about there isn't any answer key. Don't be concerned about who knows what students will do when they have those options. What if they come up with a structure I can't name? What if they can't combine in any other way besides adding and? What if they make run-on sentences and open up new problems? What am I going to do then? And the list goes on. What if, what if, what if, what if? People, people. The only persons who are going to be better writers because you control all of these questions, items, thoughts, or ideas I have on this slide here is you. Some students, you're right, they will catch on, but others will only use you in order to get through. And then we wonder when they take an exam that requires writing that they can't get their idea expressed clearly, correctly, and obviously. You know what? When you consider these questions right here, it's all okay. It's going to be okay. If you provide the scaffolding or the structures that teach these students and provide them with the opportunities and the engagements that give them the confidence and the competence in order to be able to write um, clearly and then have their revisions truly make sense, it it's going to be okay. The ultimate point is flexibility. We always are trying things out, experimenting and discovering, learning for students and for us. It's usually a straight road, isn't a straight road without bumps in it. Instead, it's often a bumpy, winding road with some potholes. We don't speed it along, but it gets us where we need to be. And that's the confidence we have to have in our students about their ability to write, and our students need to have about themselves and their ability to write. You know, if you're worried that students will compose something that you as a teacher don't know, in that moment, I want you to take a deep breath and say that there's nothing wrong at all for you to say, Well, that's an interesting construction. Can you write the sentence on another sheet of paper and leave it with me to study? You know, if you just tell them you want to study it some more, students won't be bothered by that at all because it's important that we share with them that although we may be more accomplished writers than they are at this point in time, writers continue to grow and develop as all the time throughout their lifetime. Look at this Anderson and Dean quote. We can and should expect students to apply what they learn in their polished writing, but we also need to remember that this learning won't happen overnight. Pretty powerful, huh? I don't know how many times I myself as a teacher or I have listened to one of you as teachers say, but I covered that and they just aren't doing it. They just aren't using it. The thing of it is that we can help them through us responding back to them, with the editing and the revising in their piece that they need to have in order to have it be polished. But they won't learn how to polish it until they have practiced it over and over again. It just doesn't happen overnight. You can't you can't rescue them all. They have got to learn. And one of the greatest pieces that we have that actually uh, is a high stakes piece would be, for instance, when we write for the NISA writing. Teachers are not allowed to go back and polish that writing or begin helping the students to polish it. You know, you have to teach them how to polish it so that they can practice it over and over and over and over again so that they will get that opportunity and can recognize what needs to happen. Okay, let's talk about principle 4, making meaning by reflecting and evaluating. This is pretty simple right here. It says, let's look at the 3 bullets that are on the screen. Revision is all about meaning making and making sense. Meaning making and making sense. It's all about looking closely at words, attempting to create clear and concise and connected meaning. Reflective conversations and evaluative talk increase the possibilities for transfer of our thinking. Let's talk about those. Revision, again, remember, I keep talking to you about the fact of creating a clear picture in the reader's mind of what you are, as the writer, putting on the paper so that they can translate it into those pictures. Meaning making. Does it make sense? Are your words clear, concise, and connected? Have you had any conversations or any peer feedback with anyone who has read your work? And have they provided you with reflection on have you provided them with reflection on what you intended to write? And have they provided you back evaluative talk, which gives you more 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 depth or asks you the questions? You always want to make sure that a piece of writing can stand alone on its own, that the reader doesn't have any questions. If the reader has questions, then there needs to be some uh, revision that's done so that your thinking gets transferred onto that paper and then gets transferred into the mind of the reader as the reader reads your paper. You know, Teachers, it's important to teach students to be reflective. And it's essential for you, the classroom, teacher to model the ways in which reflection guides our development as writers. I know through all of these years that we've really been focusing on writing here in the state of Nebraska. We've really been trying very hard to encourage you to be writers and to write in front of your students and to conduct what we call think alouds about what your process is in your brain as you begin to put your uh, writing down on the paper to be there. Teachers, you've got to begin with oral reflection in class. Oral reflection in class can be your reflection of your writing to your students as you go through the piece and talk about how you were going to revise that piece and so on and so forth. It also needs to be in class peer to peer with among the students or small group they and peer small groups rather. They need to have that oral reflection. And I know many of us are frustrated because our students do not know how to provide that oral reflection to a peer. That all comes down to the students truly understanding and truly being able to verbalize and visualize the indicators of the rubric. Then they can tell very specifically what's happening and what's going on. Teachers, I told you before that you need to model reflective thought. It's so very important and so very, very, very necessary. If you if you you've got to show them, your students, that even you as a writer are not perfect the first time. That you can take a piece, bring it back out in a little, even a few minutes later, and there's always something that you can revise or change in some way. Now, as you model and over time, I encourage you to invite a student who understands the reflective thinking process and have them share about their piece. In other words, have students model reflective thought. Not only you, but students. And it'll move forward. It only becomes stronger and stronger the more opportunities you offer your students in order to be able to um, be reflective. Um, Students almost become trained to think of each activity, exercise, writing task, and strategy as an entity to itself. You need to get students to think reflectively, and I know it's not easy because it takes practice and modeling. But we know that revision decisions are more than grammar and writing and reading, more than grammar and style, more, definitely more than just combining sentences in order to make it not be so choppy, to make the writing more interesting. It's more than any of these three bullet points can be. It's more about making that piece a stronger piece, a a piece that draws me in as a reader and creates that desire within me to continue reading that piece. In order to try to help you understand more about what I have been speaking to you about today, I have created a download of a sample lesson that goes with the text that John Anderson and Deborah Dean wrote. It's called, or the sample lesson is called Modifying in the Right Direction, Right Branching Sentences. Now, what you will find in this document when you download it is that you will have the rationale, you'll have the classroom activities, you'll have um, ideas on how to get your students to reflect to each other. It'll put all of the four principles into a working format so that you can experience what this text offers. There are multiple lessons, and as we work through other webinars that I plan to produce using this particular text, I'll add other sample lessons. But if you want to, highly recommend you purchase the book. And if you want the specific information, it's on about ordering. It's on the NNNC Writing Wiki, that page I call the mother page. So the address is nnncwriting.wikispaces.com/home. And if you wish to purchase, I have Stenhouse Publishers here for you, and then the ISBN number is added again as well. So I thank you for joining me for this webinar. Again, my name is Deb Wragge, and there's my contact information. And the writing websites that I try to keep active are both listed right there. The top one is the NNNC Writing Wiki page, and then the NNNC Writing Weebly is also available to you there. Now, be reminded that the materials from today and a copy for access, or the address for access for this webinar outside of the ESU 8 ESU region will be available on the NNNC Wikispace. Thanks for coming again, and I look forward to working with you again in the future.